The silence of Station Vanguard was supposed to be a comfort. A hum of life support systems, ensuring the safety of its 4 occupants in the cold vacuum of the outer rim. For months, it had been exactly that, a mechanical heartbeat in the dark. But now, the silence felt heavy, oppressive, as if the vacuum itself had seeped through the reinforced hull to suffocate them. Commander Elara Vance stared at the primary console, her reflection a ghostly overlay against the sprawling ink. Black anomaly the station was tasked to monitor. It had been 62 hours since the last transmission from Earth Command. Not a burst of static, not an automated ping. Just pure, absolute nothingness. Still nothing on the long-range arrays. Murmured Kalen, the station's communication specialist. His voice was barely above a whisper, afraid to disturb the stagnant air. It's like we've been unplugged from the rest of the universe. The deep space telemetry is completely blank. Not even background microwave radiation. Elara didn't blink. The anomaly, a sprawling, jagged rift in space that defied physical laws, seemed to pulse with an invisible rhythm. Keep trying, Kalen. Run diagnostics on the relay satellites. If there's a hardware fault, we need to find it. We can't be the only ones left. She turned away from the viewport, the harsh, artificial light casting long shadows across the command deck. Dr. Aris Thorne was meticulously recalibrating the life support sensors, a task he had repeated 3 times since the blackout began. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he manipulated the delicate instruments. Life support is fully functional, Commander. Aris reported, not looking up from the glowing readouts. Oxygen levels are nominal. Temperature is stable. But he hesitated, glancing nervously at the environmental readout. The atmospheric pressure, it fluctuates. Just a fraction of a millibar, but it's consistent. Like the station is breathing, inhaling and exhaling with a cadence that matches the visual distortions of the anomaly. Elara frowned, stepping closer to his station. Structural integrity, 100%, Aris replied quickly. There are no breaches, but the sensors are picking up micro vibrations in the hull. Almost imperceptible, but they're there. And they are spreading. Starting from the observation deck and moving inward towards the core. It's the anomaly, said the 4th crew member, Engineer Maya Lin, entering the command deck from the lower levels. She looked pale, her uniform slightly rumpled, a stark contrast to her usual immaculate appearance. I've been checking the exterior sensors. The gravimetric distortions are increasing. It's pulling on us, Commander. Not enough to rip us apart, but enough to... She trailed off, searching for the right words. Enough to change the shape of things. The very geometry of the station. Elara stepped closer, her authority masking a growing unease. What do you mean, Maya? Specify. I was in engineering. Maya explained, her voice tight with restrained panic. The corridor. It felt longer. I know the exact dimensions of this station. Elara. Every inch. The blueprints are seared into my memory. But the walk from the reactor core to the lift, it took twice as many steps. And the lighting. The shadows didn't fall right. They stretched towards the walls instead of the floor. A tense silence fell over the command deck, broken only by the faint, rhythmic hum of the life support systems. The concept was absurd, yet in the presence of the anomaly, absurdity was the new reality. Spatial distortion. Eris muttered, pushing his glasses up his nose. The anomaly could be warping the local space, time continuum. It would explain the communication blackout and the structural anomalies. We are caught in a gravitational eddy that doesn't follow Newtonian physics. If space is warping, Kylan interjected, his eyes wide and fixed on his dead console. What does that mean for us? For our bodies? If the corridor can stretch, what happens to our internal organs? It means we maintain protocol, Alara said firmly, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. We are observers. We record the data. We survive. Maya, run a full structural diagnostic. Set up laser tripwires in the corridors to measure the actual distance. Eris, monitor the crew's vital signs constantly. I want to know if these environmental changes are affecting us physically at a cellular level. Kylan, keep trying Earth. Broadcast on all frequencies. Unencrypted if you have to. The crew dispersed to their tasks. The routine a flimsy shield against the creeping dread. Alara returned to the viewport, the anomaly sprawling before her. It wasn't just a rift. It was an absence, a void so profound it seemed to draw the light from the stars themselves. And as she watched, she could swear the edges of the rift were closer than they had been an hour ago. The subtle signs of madness began slowly, creeping into their routines like a slow, acting poison. By the 5th day of the blackout, the layout of the station had irrefutably changed. Corridors that once led to the mess hall now terminated in solid bulkheads made of a dark, porous metal that wasn't on any schematic. The hydroponics bay, a lush green sanctuary, had seemingly vanished, replaced by an endless, sterile hallway that stretched beyond the station's known physical dimensions. It's not just the architecture. Eris reported during their mandated check-in. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin sallow and waxy. Or biological rhythms are completely desynchronized. Maya hasn't slept in 3 days, but her cortisol levels are nominal. Her heart rate is completely flat, but she's standing right there. Kylan insists he's hearing voices in the static. And my own blood. Under the microscope. The cells are behaving erratically. They aren't dividing, they're unraveling. Alara rubbed her temples, a dull ache throbbing behind her eyes that no painkiller could touch. Voices. From Earth. A rescue ship. No, Eris whispered, his voice cracking. From the anomaly. He says it's singing. A choir of absolute zero. Alara found Kylan in the communications array, hunched over the console, the heavy headset clamped tightly to his ears. He was muttering rapidly, his fingers flying across the controls in a frantic, disjointed rhythm that made no logical sense. The screens around him were displaying recursive fractal patterns instead of telemetry data. "Kalen," Alara said, approaching cautiously, her hand resting near the stun baton at her hip. He didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the primary screen, which displayed a chaotic mess of visual noise that occasionally coalesced into terrifying, non-Euclidean shapes. "Kalen." She reached out and touched his shoulder. He violently jerked away, ripping the headset off. "Don't! You'll disrupt the signal! The harmony is delicate!" "There is no signal, Kalen. The array is offline. The power coupling was severed 2 days ago." "You don't understand," he gasped, his face twisted in a rictus of terror and perverse awe. "It's not a transmission. It's an invitation. It's telling us how to open the door, how to flatten ourselves so we can slip underneath the fabric of reality." "There is no door," Alara said, keeping her voice level and authoritative. "You're experiencing auditory hallucinations due to the isolation and spatial distortions. Come to the medbay. Eris can give you a sedative. We need you lucid." "Eris is wrong," Kalen hissed, leaning in uncomfortably close. His breath smelled like ozone and old dust. "The station isn't warping space. The anomaly isn't changing the station. The station is changing us. It wants us to fit inside the empty spaces." Before Alara could react, Kylan lunged at the console, smashing his fists against the delicate manual overrides. Sparks showered the deck as the primary communication array shorted out completely, plunging the room into emergency red lighting. The sudden darkness was jarring, the red strobes casting nightmarish shadows that seemed to detach from the walls. "What have you done?" Alara shouted, grabbing him by the collar and throwing him back against the bulkhead. Kalen just laughed, a hollow, breathless sound that vibrated with the same frequency as the anomaly. "I answered them. I unlocked the airlocks. Not the exterior ones, the ones inside. The vibrations in the hull intensified. No longer micro. Tremors, but violent shudders that rattled the deck plating and knocked loose tools from their magnetic seals. Alarms began to blare, a chaotic symphony of warnings indicating widespread catastrophic failure. Alara dragged Kalen to the medbay, securing him to a bio bed with heavy restraints before rushing back to the command deck. Maya and Eris were already there, frantically working the secondary consoles. "Report," Alara demanded over the deafening noise of the alarms. "The anomaly is expanding," Maya yelled, her hands moving frantically across the tactile interface. "It's swallowing the local space. And Commander, the station's internal architecture is collapsing. The lower decks simply don't exist anymore. The sensors are returning null values." "Override the locks!" "Seal the bulkheads around the core." "I can't!" Maya cried, tears streaking down her pale face. "The system isn't responding. It's like the station is doing it on its own. It's reshaping itself to match the anomaly." Alara looked at the main viewport. The stars were gone, There was only the endless, roiling blackness of the anomaly, pressing directly against the reinforced plasteel. The silence had returned, profound and absolute, somehow swallowing the blaring sound of the alarms entirely, rendering the command deck completely mute, despite the flashing red lights. Iris, Alara mouthed, realizing she couldn't hear her own voice. She grabbed his arm and gestured to his monitor. Eris stared at the screen, his face completely drained of color. He typed a message on his datapad and handed it to her. Atmospheric readings are 0. We are in a hard vacuum. But they were breathing. Alara could feel her chest rising and falling, could feel the panic seizing her lungs. But, according to the environmental sensors, the air was gone. The physics of their existence had been rewritten. The station groaned, a deep, metallic vibration that resonated in their bones rather than their ears. The emergency lights flickered and died, leaving them in absolute darkness. In the pitch black, Alara felt it, a shift in the pressure, a presence that was simultaneously infinitely vast and intimately close. The unknown had breached the hull. It wasn't a monster or an alien force. It was the sheer, terrifying concept of nothingness, given physical form and hungry for substance to fill the void. Alara reached out, hoping to find Maya or Eris, but her fingers brushed against something impossibly cold and smooth. It wasn't metal. It felt like glass, but it was moving, shifting like liquid. Then the singing began. It wasn't sound, but a vibration that bypassed their eardrums and resonated directly in their cerebral cortexes. A harmonic frequency of despair and infinite emptiness. It was the sound of reality unwinding, thread by thread. A burst of static filled Alara's mind, followed by Maya's scream. It was abrupt, cut off instantly, as if she had simply ceased to exist, deleted from the universe's hard drive.
Maya!
Alara tried to shout, but no sound escaped her lips. She lunged forward into the dark, her hands grasping wildly. She found nothing but the cold, shifting glass, like substance. Suddenly, Eris's thoughts echoed in her head, distant and horribly distorted. Commander, my hands. I can't feel my hands. I'm unraveling. The geometry, it's all wrong. Alara scrambled blindly toward where he had been standing. The deck beneath her felt soft, spongy, like walking on decaying flesh. The structure of the Vanguard was breaking down entirely. She reached Eris's station. There was no one there. Just the cold, unyielding console, which now felt like it was made of bone. Alone in the dark, Alara felt the spatial distortion wrap tightly around her like a physical blanket. The command deck, the station. Everything was dissolving into the singing void. The harmonic frequency grew louder, drowning out her own thoughts. She realized then, with crystalline, terrifying clarity, what Kalen had meant in the communication array. The anomaly didn't want to destroy them. It didn't possess malice or hatred. It wanted to assimilate them. It wanted them to become part of the emptiness, to fill the vast, infinite gaps in its own impossible structure. as the physical boundaries of her body began to dissolve, fraying at the edges like burnt paper turning to ash. Alara Vance closed her eyes. She felt her memories, her identity, bleeding out into the dark. The silence returned, complete and eternal, as she finally, perfectly, fit inside the unknown.